On the 27th of July, 1953, the guns finally fell silent across the Korean peninsula. After 3 long years of war, the fighting was finally over. But peace had never truly arrived. No peace treaty was ever signed. The shooting had stopped. But the Korean War was never officially over. Even today, North and South Korea remain technically at war. Only an armistice separates the two nations, not peace. Between them lies one of the most heavily guarded borders on Earth, the Korean Demilitarized Zone, a frontier where the Cold War never truly disappeared. How did a temporary ceasefire become one of history's longest unresolved conflicts? To answer that, we must return to the end of the Second World War. In August 1945, Japan surrendered. After 35 years of colonial rule, Korea was finally free, but its future would be decided by others. American and Soviet officials needed a temporary solution. They drew a line across the map, the 38th parallel. The decision was made in just a few hours. No Korean leaders were consulted. One line would change millions of lives. The Soviet Union occupied the North. The United States took control of the South. The temporary division had begun. As tensions between East and West continued to grow, so did the divide across Korea. 2 occupation zones were becoming 2 different nations. By 1948, 2 separate governments had emerged. Each claimed to be the only legitimate government of all Korea. Neither accepted the division. The border became increasingly unstable. Small clashes erupted almost every week. A larger conflict seemed inevitable. The Cold War was beginning to divide the world. Korea quickly became one of its first major front lines. The peninsula was now a global battleground. The Soviet Union backed the North. The United States supported the South. Both sides prepared for what seemed unavoidable. Then before dawn, on the 25th of June, 1950, everything changed. Before sunrise, North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel. Thousands of soldiers advanced without warning. The Korean War had begun. Backed by Soviet tanks and heavy artillery, the invasion moved with overwhelming speed. South Korean defenses quickly collapsed. Only 3 days later, Seoul had fallen. The capital was now under North Korean control. The invasion shocked the international community. The United Nations responded with remarkable speed. A multinational military force was approved. The United States assumed command of the United Nations coalition. General Douglas MacArthur was placed in charge. The conflict had become international. Troops from around the world began arriving in Korea. Their mission was clear: stop the invasion. By August, United Nations forces had been pushed to the southeastern corner of the peninsula. The last defensive line became known as the Pusan Perimeter. Everything depended on holding that position. The situation was desperate. Supplies were running low. Defeat seemed only days away. General MacArthur proposed a daring plan: a surprise amphibious landing far behind enemy lines. Many believed it would fail. Against all expectations, the operation moved forward. History was about to change once again. On the 15th of September, 1950, United Nations forces landed at Incheon. It was one of the boldest military operations of the 20th century. The attack caught North Korean forces completely off guard. Their supply lines were cut. The momentum of the war suddenly shifted. Within days, United Nations troops retook Seoul. The city changed hands once again. The tide had turned. The advance continued beyond the 38th parallel. For the first time, the North was retreating. United Nations forces pushed toward the Yalu River. The border with China was now within reach. A new crisis was unfolding. Chinese leaders watched the advance with growing concern. They feared hostile forces on their border. Intervention became increasingly likely. In late October, Chinese forces entered the war. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers crossed into Korea. The conflict entered a dangerous new phase. The offensive was swift and overwhelming. United Nations troops were forced into a rapid retreat. The war had changed once again. Seoul fell for a second time. Millions of civilians fled the fighting. Hope gave way to uncertainty. Neither side could secure a decisive victory. The front gradually stabilized. A long and exhausting stalemate had begun. After months of brutal fighting, neither side could break the deadlock. The front lines barely moved. Peace negotiations began in 1951, but reaching an agreement proved painfully slow. The war continued while diplomats negotiated. Finally, on the 27th of July, 1953, an armistice was signed. The guns fell silent at last. Yet no peace treaty ever followed. Technically, the Korean War has never ended. Only the fighting stopped. More than 70 years later, the Korean Peninsula remains divided, a reminder that some wars do not truly end when the shooting stops. They continue through history,